Okay, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Our speaker at this time is Eric.
Eric Addick. I guess it's my turn up to bat. It's not usually one of my favorite service things to do, but I do it in small areas, like in jail. I'm an H&I guy, and sometimes I think like the gift of desperation. It never got me in the rooms, but it got me to jail a lot. So I came out of the jail system, and I never really found recovery in jail. I don't think I ever walked out of jail any better than when I walked in. By the time I get out, and I never got my passes or never got my paroles or anything, I was always in a negative headspace by the time I get out. But my story's a little different. I'm an old hippie, and when I got into drugs, I thought it was like the greatest thing in the world. But I'm going to go back a little to when I was a kid, because that's part of my story. And I remember I was 3 years old, and I had a fight in the sandbox with little Bobby, and that was his name too, because he'd stolen my car that my dad had sent me. And he was in Canada, and I was in Scotland, and he was the prince. I got all these gifts from him, and I never knew the man. Eventually we come to Canada, and I was growing up. I don't know. It was a different time, and there were very authoritarian parents. It was my way or the highway. My dad was Scottish. He was the king of his castle, and I was a very sensitive kid. And what happened with me is he disciplined me and everything. I became very rebellious, and that rebellion stayed with me most of my life. And what happened, my introduction with drugs was 1969, they had Woodstock. And in 1970, we had strawberry fields up here at Mossport Park. And, I was into, we'd, split a Mickey or something before we went to the dance. And sometimes we'd go out to this place and we'd go road run, and we'd end up in the hairpin and drink and stuff, because that's all we knew. So we knew how to steal farmers' wine and stuff like that too, because we'd work for farmers. My dad had moved us out to a farm thinking a relocation might help me and my sister and away from the environment we were in. And one day we seen this guy with long hair and bell bottoms, and he was hitchhiking, and we said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "Oh, I'm going to Mossport Park." Had you not heard? It was 3 days before the festival. So we said, no, we hadn't heard about it. He says, well, it's the same as Woodstock. It's going to be huge, and there's going to be thousands and thousands of people and bands. And so we only lived a little ways away in the country, so we ended up going there, and we knew how to sneak in. And there was 500 girls sitting on the thing waiting for people to pay their way in. And we said, listen, we know how to get in with a couple of girls and come in with us. And we got in there, and then this guy was trying to light a pipe as we sneaked through the woods, and we all circled around. It was windy. And then we're going down, and there was a track around the outside of the racetrack. And we sat on a bench. Somebody gave us a beer, and we're having a beer, and this girl walked by, and I'm 15, and my buddy's 15, and we're just looking at her, and she doesn't have a stitch of clothing on, and she walks by and gives us a big smile and keeps walking. And I didn't know what was going on here, but whatever was going on, I liked it. This was great for a 15-year-old kid. And then we got over and we got into the track, and the thing was full of people. And sometimes you see those guys with the Mad Hatter hats, LSD $1, running around, and there was one of those guys, and there was people, and we're working through the thing, and we're going up to the stage. They got some serious bands up there, and some guy's passing a bottle around, and he says, here's some electric wine. And I'm drinking it because I know how to drink wine. And after I drank quite a lot, he says, "Do you know what electric wine is?" And I said, "No." He says, "You ever done LSD?" I said, "No." He says, "Give me that bottle back." So he took the bottle back, and I'm full LSD. I don't know anything, but we work our way up to the stage, and there's a fence there, and somebody's leaning up against my knees. I'm leaning against the fence, and I'm leaning against somebody else's knees, and And that's all I remember for about 24 hours. And that was my thing. And this is where I thought, like, these are my people. I finally found my people. Like, I like whatever's going on here. This is wonderful. And I remember, like, lying to my parents where I'd stayed out overnight. But that was my introduction into drugs. And at that time, it's like, you know, it was like we had like our own thing, our own bands. We had like Eric Clapton and, you know, they had like Elvis Presley in country, and we had like electric guitars, rock and roll. Like rock and roll was just coming. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, like that was our people. I could tell my people they had long hair, bell bottoms, love beads, and paisley shirts, and like, and I just started into that, and it was almost like rebellious against society, because at that time there was a Vietnam War, and we were getting all the draft dodgers, people that didn't want to go to a different country and kill people they didn't know, and we were very, you know, into, you know, them. I got introduced to other drugs, and it was like, well, you know, like nobody's going to kill anybody, or, you know, tripping over a sofa, getting to the fridge to get a brownie or something, like, you know, we're not going to drive and kill anybody, you know, under the influence. And I started down this road, and what I found was that most addicts find out real early that if you got a bag of something and you sell half a bag, you can get your half bag free, eh? And I started down that, and I started with a group of guys, and we had a farmhouse. We actually got fairly big. I think they just had I don't know. I was the youngest, and I think they just saw me as like the little brother type, and they were all older. A couple of guys had been to the jail before for probably, and I don't actually know what, but I was in charge of security, and I had like guns. Like by now I'm like 16, 17. I got guns, and they were always very good, like with girls and everything. I was always a little shy and everything, and we'd had all kinds of different drugs, you know, and we used to sell drugs, and that's what we used to do, all different kinds. And then one day they decided to go shopping and get some sheepskin jackets or something at the mall, and I decided to stay. And they'd asked me about this drug, and I said no. I knew how to do it, but I said just leave it in the fridge for me. And they all took off, and I was by myself, and I took this drug out. And I knew how to do it because I'd watched people use drugs in that form before, and I did it. And when I did this drug, it was like a key going into a lock. It was like, this is what I've been looking. This drug made me feel the way I've always wanted. I was always looking for something. And I think, like before, I've always been looking for something, because before that happened, it was like LSD, mescalinol, go find God. Like that was, I was looking for spirituality and, you know, checking out Buddhism and other stuff. But once I started doing this drug, eventually what happened, I didn't do drugs did me. That's what happened, and they started to control my life. And I started to do things that usually I wouldn't do, and it was a bit of a progression. And I tried even like selling different drugs so I could buy my drug, and then I started stealing more. I think as a kid I was a little bit of a thief anyway, but I started like stealing more and doing stuff and crossing my own morals, my own values, then breaking into thing, and that led me to jail. And jail, there's not a lot to say about jail. Even in jail, we learned how to get drugs and do things. I think addicts are very creative, and I could tell you ways and means we got drugs in jail. But anyway, I almost like I've always been a runner, right? Catch me when you can. They let me out and bail. When you catch me, I'll deal with it. That's how I've always been with consequences, or when it hurts hard enough. When it hurts enough, I'll change. So anyway, I ended up going to jail, and they put me in. They didn't want to send me to the penitentiary because I was still like fairly young. I think I was under 20, and but I had a long list of charges, and even my lawyer said we can't have this in our street corners. like he could have been the Crown in that case. But anyway, they sent me to reformatory. Even in reformatory, I rebelled and just got high a lot, and they sent me to a more maximum place. And I learned later that that if they keep a person in isolation, we probably found this through COVID, you keep people in isolation, it creates fear in a person, you know. So they kept us all in isolation. They let us out a couple of hours a day to cut up, because like when we're all together, we'd probably just rip the place apart because nobody give a shit. But when they create fear in a person, they're not liable to do that. They just want to be part of the human race and talk and everything, and then locked up again. So that happened for a while. When I got out, I ended up doing some drugstores, breaking into some drugstores and stuff, and back in, and that continued till finally I went through the reformatory system, the penitentiary system, from low security to high security, and then return. I probably only probably the most maybe 3-4 years at one time. I'd get out. One time I got out June 6th, and I was back in jail by June 13th. My crimes hadn't really progressed to really, really bad. But anyway, I was sitting in Collins Bay, and this guy said to me, he says, he's talking to me, you always get a social worker, he says, you're a recidivist there. And I'd read a lot of libraries. Sometimes I'd been in places for a few years, I'd read everything in the library, and I hadn't heard the word recidivist before, and I didn't know what that was. I said, what's a recidivist? He says, that's somebody that'll never change. I says, how can you say that? How can you say I'll never change? He says, well, I have a 20-year period. You spent 15 years in jail. That shows no change. Your crimes are the same. My crimes are actually getting worse. They were getting more desperate. But he didn't know that because I hadn't got caught for that. And then I thought about that. And, you know, every time I got out, the same thing would happen. It'd be like, well, I've been alone for a while. Maybe I'll go to the hotel. Maybe I'll meet a girl. Monday, I'll go look for a job. But once I started using, Monday never happened. And I'd be back into the same thing and just get back there quicker and faster. And when I walked into the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, I walked in because I wanted to stop going to jail. I didn't if you guys had told me how to control my using, I'd have been okay with that too, but you said abstinence from all drugs. So I thought that was pretty severe, but I was ready to give it a go. So anyway, that's what I did, and I took to this program like a duck to water, because once I heard the first step, and I understood the first step, that I had the disease of addiction, that it made sense for some of the things I did, because up to that point, I did things that I didn't even believe I did. It was like I'd shake my head and wonder how I could have done something like that, you know, when I'd straightened out. So it started to make sense. And then after I was here for a little while, I understood that it didn't matter. I didn't have to go to 10 different programs because I had 10 different substances. I could do everything right here in Narcotics Anonymous. So I made my home in Narcotics Anonymous. And you people knew my language and everything. And when I first got into the program, it's like I was institutionalized, and I believe I was criminally insane. I only knew I could walk down the street and I'd say I could beat that alarm system, or that car door's open, or maybe I could grab. It's just how I thought. I just thought that way. And it had to change, and I didn't know how to take care of myself. I'd been with a girl once for 5 years, but I'd be in and out of jail, and she'd finally thrown the towel and said, Eric, nothing's changing here. There's nothing changing. And a lot of hard pain in that, but I didn't blame her for what happened, and just the way it went. But so I had to, what happened with that relationship is she became my mother, and I became looking after my addiction. She took care of all the bills, everything else, And, you know, jail's like a big mother. The jail probably saved me from killing myself, you know, because I kept getting, before I'd get too much damage, and I'd always walk in like 98 pounds, and then I'd get into the weights and everything. So I didn't know how to take care of myself and what to do with money. I know you get money and you buy dope. That's what you do. That's just how it is. So in early recovery, it was like, I remember going to a meeting, and, you know, we had some pretty girls. And I remember one girl, Sharon, and she said, you know, I've been out of a relationship for 3 years now. Maybe I'll stay out for 5 years. And I'd 60 days clean. I thought, the girl's a fucking lunatic. Like, if I like somebody and they like me, we're good to go. It's like, but as time went on, I ended up getting a sponsor. I walked into my first NA meeting, and the guy, big guy, deep voice, and he says, "You want a hug?" I said, "Want a hug? Fuck, I don't want to even shake your hand now." And I went and sat in the back of the room and crossed my arm. But I watched this guy, and he was like walking the walk and talking the talk. I asked him to be my sponsor. And he says, "Well, we went out for coffee." He says, "Well, I have some requirements." I said, "Well, do you have any requirements?" I said, "No, I don't have any requirements. I hadn't thought about it. They just said get a sponsor." And he says, "Well, I need you to get a home group. I need you to work the steps. I need you to do service. And I need you to go to 3 meetings a week." And I really wanted to find, because I got to the point where I wanted recovery, like, I had a shot at life. So I said, okay. And the same thing, I do that 30 years later. That's the same thing I do. Sometimes I go to 4 meetings a week. Sometimes, it depends what's going on with life, but I still do the same things. And somewhere along the road, I don't know how it happened, but I ended up doing H&I, and it was a young offenders unit, and we ended up, there was no accountability, so we pulled out as NA, we made some policies and procedures, went back in, and the jail heard about it, and they started allowing me to go into the jail. I still had like a few years probation. I'd got off a charge easy, and they charged me wrong, and I was still on a probation for it. And I started going in. And since that jail, I've retired one of their program directors. We had to sit in. I think I've been doing it for 29 years now, because that's what I do, because I'm an H&I guy. And what I like about that is when I go into the jail, I say, you know what? I've been in this room. It was the last jail I was in. They put me on a ghost train to get me out of my county bucket because I was such a shit disturber. And I said, I've sat right here. I says, and I tell them my story, and they identify, and I said, if I can do it, if this program works for me, maybe it can work for you, and that's sort of been my message for a while. So anyway, I got an apartment. I'm doing the right thing with a welfare check, and I'm starting to work. One of the things that happened to me in jail when I was in this major security place, we made license plates, and they got a big machine, and you got to use these numbers, and then you press a thing, it comes down, and you got to do that for like 4 hours. And I said, you know what? Fuck this. I ain't doing this. You can take me to the hole. So they take me to the hole, because I tell people, like, I'm ADD, I've got addiction, I've got PTSD. Like, I just can't do certain work. So anyway, that's part of how I am. And I ended up getting up some work in labor, and I ended up working in a pet store, and I ended up doing I'd work 2 days here. I got in as a carpenter, and then I become a shipper receiver. I started to do that, so I'd work a few hours one night, do that in the weekend. Laundromat, just had to clean, did step work all day, could phone people. It was really good, and it was just the way my life was set up, enough to just do okay, but I was self-supporting. And, the relationship, they said, well, get a plan. So I got a spider plan. They say if you can keep a plant alive for a year, you can have a relationship. So I got a spider plant, because you're not supposed to be able to kill them. So I killed my spider plant because I forgot to water it. So, being a smart cookie, I thought, you know what? I'll get a cactus, because you don't have to water those suckers. So I got a cactus, but I lived in a basement apartment, and I guess cactus needs sunlight, so I killed it. I thought, you know what? I've always wanted German Shepherds, and I'd had a German Shepherd at one point before. I got a boy. I go to work, the neighbors are saying, Eric, their dog's barking all day. So I ended up getting a female dog, and keep him company. And, I was going to say I'm a bit of a romantic, but what happened was I made this little doghouse, and I'd never got my license. I think I was over 40 years. I knew how to drive, because we'd steal a car, do a score, and then we'd drop the car. At that time, I thought they had like cameras at all the gas stations. They'd know it was a stolen car. They do now, but they didn't then. So we just drive it till it was out of gas. That was part of like how that happened. And I'm saving money, and I got my license. I ended up like praying, God, keep everybody safe in the road while I'm learning how to drive, because I thought I did know how to drive, but I really didn't. So anyway, I'm putting $5, $10, sometimes $15 a week in this little doghouse. So I'm saving up for a car. I thought, oh my God, I will never, ever be able to buy a car. It's going to take me 20 years. So anyway, my female shepherd got pregnant. And the next thing I know is I got 12 German Shepherd puppies. 2 were stillborn, but I didn't have papers, but they were purebred shepherds, so that was $2,000, and that bought my first car. And it came to believe that if I do the right things will happen. That was the first thing, eh? And I remember coming back. I got the car in Zilda, and coming back, guy says there isn't much gas. So my friend had come over with me and got the car. We got out at the gas station, and I didn't know how to put gas in a car. I was 44 years old, didn't know how to put gas in a car. And what I find is addicts, we fall through cracks, eh? I have friends that didn't know how to read and write. And I said, they said, I know stop. I know that word, and they know different words, eh? So I think sometimes, we all come in with areas where we're better suited than other people. So anyway, that was my first experience with sort of doing the right thing and the path my life was sort of leading, because it was just on faith. I believe that if I do the right things will happen. And I worked in a pet store, and I ended up getting an aquarium with some fish, and they were telling me about these fish. And they said, Eric, when the female's out in the cave and the boy's out and there's a wall up, she's got eggs in there. And I thought, that's really cool. And it happened, and I was able to see it. And then one day, the wall's down, she's out, she's got 90 babies underneath her in this flock of little fish. And then what happened was I watched her, and she started, because I had it right beside my bed, and I'm watching her, and she's picking them all up in her mouth and putting them back in this cave, eh? And when she got the last one in, I thought, I wonder why she did that. And all of a sudden, the aquarium light went off. She'd taken all of them and put them back in the cave before it got dark out. And it's fuck, I know parents that don't even know how to do that. And I started to get fascinated with fish, eh? So, I'm a good addict. I got a couple of more aquariums, and then I had 3. And then it went exactly from 3 to 11. Then it went exactly from 11 to 22. And I ended up, they moved me into this place because somebody could see what was happening. And I ended up with 150 fish tanks. And in one room, I had a 640-gallon swimming pool with fish in it too, eh? And I made my living from tropical fish, selling tropical fish. And we put them in bags and run them down to Toronto. I had friends in the business, so that became my business, breeding and selling tropical fish. And slowly, I started to have to let one of my jobs go, and then I had to let another job go. And then I started selling fish food. And it came to a point where I was doing 15 things for money. But I could never be a 9-to-5-er. I was always in my life just sort of graduated. And that's just sort of how things happened. But I think what happened more than anything else is I always had faith. If I did the right thing would happen. And sometimes with money, it'd just be all of a sudden I'd be short on money and something would happen. And I remember one time, I needed money just at this exact moment. And I go to the mailbox, and there was a check there, eh? And it was holy shit, I needed that money then, and that check showed up, eh? And that happened twice on me, eh? And I started to believe that if I was doing the right things would happen. And then I thought, my rational mind says, you know what, Eric? That fucking check had been in the mail for 3 days, before you got it. But I started to believe that maybe my higher power didn't work in the same time and space I did. That maybe there was a bigger picture that my higher power saw. And I've sort of had that thing, and it's still today. I've never felt anxiety around money too much, because there's always seems to be enough. And I was getting short last week because things cost money, and what I do costs money. And I was just thinking about it, and then I got a phone call from a friend, and all of a sudden I got a contract with him for a couple of months, taking care of his fish tanks, and all of a sudden there's money again, eh? And one of the things that happened was I started to do tank maintenance. So people and places need people to look after their fish tank, and the money is so good, it's sickening. Well, it's a lot of money I make, for a couple hours work, and I work every Monday morning now. That's all I work. Everything else I do is all my hobbies have turned. I never thought I'd get out of fish, But there came a time where in the building they said, Eric, you better think about shutting this down. I wasn't paying for water, and I was doing water changes, and I had 150 aquariums, and I had a swimming pool, and I used to take freezers. I take the motor out, and they'd become an aquarium. I fill them full of water. Freezers were perfect. I put a couple of filters in it, and I grow my fish out, because the faster you can grow your fish out, the faster you can sell them. The more clean water they have, they think they're in a bigger space, because if not, they create an enzyme, and they say stunted. So the more clean water you can give them, the faster they grow. Right? So anyway, I thought I'd never get out of fish, but I've slowly got out of fish, except once a week I go around and take care of aquariums because the money's so good. I got into bees. So, I started with one beehive, and it was just like fascinating, and then I got 3 beehives. And right now I'm up to 25 beehives. But I still sell a little fish food and stuff. I still do tank maintenance, but now I sell honey, and then I'm doing honey, and then I started making candles and lip balms. But, then I go to, Value Village or secondhand stores, and I find little figurines, and I thought that'd be a nice. And I'd make my own little figurine candle. You had to learn how to do the wick to this diameter of the candle to make it burn right. And so that's where I am now. I'm into honeybees, and just that's what I do. And I lost a lot this winter. 2 years in a row, I've lost a lot. But some years are good and some years aren't. And it's learning, because the bees have their problems right now too. So it's like farming and learning how to deal with their problems. But what happened with me is like all of a sudden I want to know what flowers are in season. And then I found out there's just as many trees that the bees get pollen and nectar from. And all of a sudden my whole world's like opened up again, and I'm still like learning, and I'm still like fascinated by life. And I think of how my life has evolved and how it's been like tailor-made for me, because I could have never come in here, and I could never gone to a job. I could never punched the clock, done 9 to 5. It's just sort of, and if I'd like they say, if I'd wrote down what I wanted and then got it, I think I'd have been shorting myself. I think I would have. And it's funny because some of my old habits are still there. I remember when I started selling fish food, I sell a lot of pellet and flake, and I put some flake and weigh it, and it, I'd fluff it up to make it look like there was more in the bag. It's like, and when I'm doing medicine and stuff, I know exactly how many grams, ounces, and pounds and kilos make everything, and I'm able to figure out measurements and something. And I never thought this had happened, but so now I'm doing tinctures. I got into mushrooms a little bit, but we do propolis tinctures. Propolis, the bees use that to sterilize the inside of their hives, sticky stuff. And people want some tincture, so I got a still going in my house because I need the alcohol at a certain level, And it's funny because I have to go to one of my friends that isn't in the program and say, "Taste that. Can you taste the alcohol?" Because then I got to distill it. Well, if it reaches a certain, because I won't taste it, But I'm not so scared of drugs anymore. But still, it'd be a bad habit to have a mouthful of booze, I figure. So anyway, so that's sort of like my story. And what happened lately, I find some of us have areas where we do good at, and they talk about in our reading sometimes how, trust the higher power with money, or sometimes you have to turn over your relationship. And I ended up in a relationship in the last year and a half, and she broke off with me once, and I broke off with her. We ended up running into each other. But the thing is, it's like I ended up, because it was driving me crazy, and a lot of it was because it was my stuff. And I'm a runner, and I still have trouble with feelings and feelings and expressing feelings and dealing with problems. I've never dealt with problems in a relationship. That's never happened. Or my problems. What I found in a relationship, you come face to face with yourself in a relationship. That's what happens. So I've got a lot of stuff to work on. But I had to get down, I had to pray, and I had to say, you know what, God, I turn this over to you. Whatever your will is with this situation, I trust you. And I ended up running back into her, and we ended up talking. But where I had to go with the surrender was really, really deep, and I'd never been there. And I understand now how sometimes we have to surrender at different levels, And Yeah. So that was one of the things, because I was always rebellious. When I came in the program, I did the first step and I surrendered to this program. Whatever you guys said, I was willing to do to stay clean. Till now, it's like I feel like I'm on this path. And if I get off this path a little bit, I can tell, And I feel like I'm the captain of my ship. I'm responsible for my life, but I don't control my destiny. I don't know where it's going. I just keep doing the right thing and let the wind blow and take me where it's supposed to. And so far, it's been a huge adventure. And so if you're new here, and part of the thinking is I had to change my thinking because I was a street person. I was a jail person. I remember the first time it happened, I started to change was I was out in Azilda again, and I watched a truck drive. He drove off the road, and there was a car in front of me. It was a purple station wagon with a couple of kids. They pulled over. I pulled over. I ran across. I thought maybe the guy had a heart attack or something, And I went around to the passenger side, and he was getting out, and I could smell alcohol in his breath, I said, "You been drinking?" He said, "I had a couple. I had one." I said, "Oh, okay." And he went up, and right by then there was a Timmy's, and there was a hotel there. And he walked and he went into the hotel, and I thought, perfect. That's what the fuck I would have done, so I wouldn't get charged. But I went to the phone booth and I phoned the cops. I said, "Listen, guy pulled off, drove into a field here, and I smelled alcohol in his breath. So I'm just telling you where the incident is and that." And the reason I did it is because instead of going off the road, he could have very easily crossed the line and hit that car. And that was the first time I thought, you know what? That was the right thing to do in that situation. And I find that sometimes the right thing to do in the situation isn't always the easy thing. But that was the first step of me getting out and moving away from, the old jail mentality where nobody takes responsibility for anything, You always blame a rat or you always blame somebody else, and nobody ever says, "Well, that's just how that was." And I started to do the right thing. And now sort of what I do, because I think of the community, like when we get to the 9th step, I think of my community, and I'm part of my community. And I do a pro bono thing with the fish tank for the Children's Hospital, and I've done it for years. And it's just, I'll never be able to pay back even financially what they've spent on lawyers, how much the police in jail cells, how much they fed me. I will never break even with that. The balancing beam will always, so it keeps me. But once every couple of weeks, I think, you know what, I got nothing else in this end of town except the Children's Hospital. Maybe I'll tell them to find somebody. I've been doing it for years. and then I think, no, Eric, this is why you do this. You do this to pay back your community, And this year I even voted. I hadn't voted for a couple of years, but I voted again. I got a good joke, but I can't tell you. I cannot, not because it's on the mic. Yeah, so maybe I will anyway. So they made a stamp with Trudeau on the stamp, and it wouldn't stick on any envelopes or anything, So they made a little committee to find out why wasn't that stamp sinking? And they found out that people were spitting on the wrong side of the stamp. Just cute. I just thought it was cute. So anyway, I'm telling jokes, so it's time to wrap it up. Thanks for letting me share.
On behalf of Orkna 36, I would like to thank Eric for sharing his experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join us in a circle to close this meeting with the wee version of the Serenity Prayer.
It's all houses now. Yeah. So where did you do your first MA meeting to? So what year, how long did you clean time? I'm sorry, I have like a million questions. Oh, okay. Wow. And so are you born and raised in Rome? Okay, yes. That's right. Yeah.
I only see her. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, they're the best.
Grandparents of our area.
Wow.
They were
Yeah.
so they sort of stayed. Well, Rick Club.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, I haven't heard him sing. I go to a weekly meeting with him, but I don't. Yeah, I've never heard him. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, totally. That bird fed by that time.
Yeah,
What a
it's
story.
kind of beautiful. He's very interesting. I mean, if he sponsor a person, he sponsored the sponsor. The sponsor was like a big network of
We're all connected
he's somehow he brings like up there and he's out his hands and everybody. Yeah, it's
And
great.
it comes down and Bill's sponsors Bill.
Yeah.
Sponsors
Yeah. I love it. I love it. What a great story, man.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And now about your company, I'm totally interested. I love beef hopeless. I absolutely, I know the benefits.
You know, it's the longest life expectancy out of any career. You didn't know that?
Well, I
Yeah.
think it's beautiful because of like what's happening, you know, right now. But I love it.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, you sell online? No.
I don't even advertise it for that part. I sometimes on the balls, but I don't advertise. So usually what happens is my honey I collect her in August, September,
Okay.
and then I try to have it also for Christmas. That's usually what happens. I get the boxes of stuff too that I sell. I do the farmers market on Thursdays, and then I come inside.
Yeah, off here.
Yeah.
Farmers market.
Yeah, there's kind of farmers market on Saturday. My friends sell there, and we're all close. And I got in the I don't know. It's like I get enough. It works.
Yeah, it works for you. Exactly.
That's awesome.
I love that. I work at a little breakfast at Squanto Villa Waitress, and I have all of the seniors, and we talk about what Bowmanville was like in the day and stuff, and it's so funny. I can't wait to tell them about the law sports, you know?
Yeah. It was a really good.
Yeah, that's wild. All right, well, great listening to you. Absolutely. All right, get in there. Come on. Love it. All right.
We'll probably see you then.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to
Yeah, we
see
gotta come back up for the farmers market.
So I lived out in St. Charles for 5 or 6 years. Yeah, like towards North Bay.